World War III has erupted. Europe is on fire. The body count is already shocking, but at least the war hasn't gone nuclear. Just like in World War II, the USA is at first reluctant to send its boys over to the blood-stained expanses of the battlegrounds. But there is another problem. The Gen Zs of America just don't want to fight. There aren't that many people to send over to Europe. What's happened? Will this mean a draft for young folks in the future? It's more possible than you think. We'll come back to the draft soon. First of all, let's just say we hope we never get to see a scenario like this in our lifetime, and we hope future generations won't either. World wars, we expect, are a thing of the past. When World War II was raging, the world was very different from what it is now. Not only are governments much less willing to start or take part in great wars now, but young folks, as we'll show you today, are a different breed from the guys back in the 30s and 40s. Before we get into that, we'll ask you this. How do you feel when you learn about things such as the trench warfare of World War I? What's your opinion of men in the millions being ordered to go over the top to certain death just so a general far off can move a few pieces on his battlefield map? The phrase lambs to the slaughter comes to mind. How do you feel when you hear about 70 to 85 million people that died in World War II? Something like 27 million people died in the Soviet Union alone. Some Soviet battles starved civilians so much that some people even resorted to cannibalism. How do you think you'd fare in that kind of world? Or what about the war crimes, which were vast and terrifying? We know so much about these things now. We've read the stories. We've seen the horror in the videos. Yeah, life ain't what it used to be, and thank God for that. War isn't appealing to many people these days. We know too much about it. Even the most compelling propaganda wouldn't shift the average Gen Z guy or gal off the sofa to join a war started by politicians they don't like or trust. As George Orwell so presciently said in his dystopian novel 1984, the future generations of people won't be able to stomach global wars like the ones in the past. Orwell believed we'd have endless conflicts instead. He never used the words military-industrial complex, but he alluded to it. He believed to keep the people controlled, they'd need constant enemies, and then they'd sign up to support their leaders in spending huge amounts of cash on war technologies, new weapons that Orwell said would be, well, kind of like the ones we actually have today. Of course, nuclear weapons would be a big reason the world wouldn't join in a mass war, but it also is because people have just changed. Orwell was probably right when he said new generations wouldn't be able to stomach bloodbaths like those folks of the past did. Today, war is brought to you by video. Videos can be live streamed right as limbs are blown off and faces are mangled. It's just all too real. One of the main reasons why so many people in the past were so willing to fight is that they just didn't know what they were getting into. Some held onto a romantic notion about fighting for their country, but after they did, many came back mentally shattered. We think most young people nowadays have a clear idea of how mentally and emotionally crippling it can be to watch men die and take men's lives. Also, are young men who make up the brunt of the military now less masculine? Scientifically, no. But in terms of how they feel, maybe. You've likely seen all those memes which show a man from the past compared to a man of today. Okay, so they're silly, not representative of reality, and possibly even offensive to some of you, but do they point to some kind of truth? In 2016, the Washington Post wrote a story headlined, "The Stark Difference Between Millennial Men and Their Dads." It featured a YouGov poll titled "The Decline of the Manly Man." It also featured academics saying social norms have changed and men are not the men they used to be. Not that this was always a bad thing. It just might be, though, when you're trying to recruit guys to enlist in the military, which often means asking them to be prepared to kill people. It would be hard to argue with the fact that fighting and bravery on the battlefield are somewhat masculine traits. It's more likely that men who've grown up playing army and roughhousing with their pals are more likely to want to fight than men who've grown up saying that kind of thing is for mindless apes. Maybe more modern men might prefer shopping for fashion accessories, taking endless selfies of their fine bodies, and dreaming of the day they'll star on Broadway. Sure, we are generalizing, but some academics are saying that men's views of what it means to be a man has changed a lot over the years. So yes, it's hard now to attract young people to sign up because the world has changed so much. If there was a world war, we doubt that many people would want to go and join it. This is the reason the draft would have to come back. We'll come back to that topic later. The U.S. easily has the largest military in the world. In March of 2022, the Biden-Harris administration submitted to Congress a proposed budget of $813.3 billion for 2023. For 2022, the budget was around $750 billion. China was next with $237 billion. The UK, that mighty military power of the past, was just $55.1 billion. Though admittedly, after things kicked off in Ukraine, the UK said they might double that. We're not going to analyze budgets today, we're going to talk about people. You, in fact, or many of you. Right now, the US has about 1,832,000, or 0.5% of the population, as its total military personnel. 1.39 million are active, and 442,000 folks are reserve. The Army has the most personnel, followed by the Navy, the National Guard, and the Air Force. Looking at more statistics, about 600,000 of the entire U.S. military personnel are under 25. Over 285,000 people are aged 26 to 30, and the numbers keep going down after that. About 105,000 personnel are over 41. As you'll see, it's starting to look like the older guys will have to stay on longer than they initially planned. According to data from the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense, most personnel earn a wage that puts them in a fairly decent earning bracket. The U.S. Army's yearly average wage is $65,102 a year, although some reports say the lowest pay in the Army is only about $20,172. You might be able to convince someone to risk their life and shoot absolute strangers for 65 grand, but you'd be hard-pressed to convince a young person to do that for 20 grand. Unless they were very poor and didn't feel like they had many better options. And that's how things generally went in the past. But we don't live in the past. It would be harder now to recruit even the poorest of folks. In 2018, the states with the most people enlisted were California, Texas, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and New York. But if we look at the percentage of the population of enlisted recruits that year, the states that had the most people signing up were from South Carolina, Florida, Hawaii, Georgia, and Alabama. The least represented states were Washington, Washington, D.C., North Dakota, Massachusetts, Utah, and Rhode Island. The top races in terms of numbers were white, black, and Asian, and then the data just says other. A big change from the past is the number of women who serve. In 1972, when the draft just ended, women made up just 2% of the enlisted forces and 8% of the people in the officer corps. These days, it's about 16% and 19% respectively. As for people who are LGBTQ+, we can't find the official data on that because there is none. We just know that these days the U.S. military no longer embraces the don't ask, don't tell policy. President Biden reversed Trump's transgender military ban, but in relation to today's show, we doubt that reversal will make any profound difference in recruitment numbers. Maybe you're now thinking those numbers sound pretty healthy. So, what's the problem? The problem is that fewer young people nowadays want any part of the military. They're quite happy to vicariously blow people's heads off in games like Brothers in Arms, Road to Hill 30, but spilling virtual blood is about as far as they want to take the matters. In 2022, New York Times said as much. An article talked about the difficult time the Army was having trying to enlist new recruits. It's currently many thousands of young folks short. The Army just can't find enough people to join up. These days, all over the U.S., you can hear a pin drop at an Army recruiting station, while not long ago they were busy places. As General Joseph Martin, the Army's Vice Chief of Staff, said, "The talent pool from which we recruit continues to shrink." New soldiers are having to leave the recruiting stations and go to places such as strip malls and fast food restaurants to find people they might convince that joining the Army is the right move. These guys are in desperate times. Don't be surprised if the next time you're at the movie theater, some guy taps on your back and tells you the Army's rewarding and character building, and if you're lucky, you get to ski. The Times wrote about this recruitment issue. It threatens to throw a wrench into the military's machinery, leaving critical jobs unfilled and some platoons with too few people to function. It is serious. Right now, it's the worst recruitment has been since the all-volunteer force became a thing in 1973. This is not a good time for low numbers either, seeing as the U.S. has just sent more troops, about 20,000 extra, over to Europe to reinforce NATO. It was reported that the Army's been the worst hit, with only getting 68% of the recruits it needs. The Navy was only 8% down, but the Air Force was doing okay earlier this year. Top Gun 2 probably helped. In fact, according to Major General Edward Thomas Jr., commander of the Air Force Recruiting Service, the movie did help. As we said in the first part of the show, part of the problem the Army and Navy are facing is related to generational changes in attitude. The military is not as enticing as it used to be, not for Gen Z, but there's more to empty recruiting stations than that. The unemployment rate matters. In 1933, the U.S. unemployment rate was a staggering 24.9%. That was very high. When it goes high, the military generally has less of a hassle trying to find recruits. In 1944, the unemployment rate was only 1.2%, but then many men were actually fighting in the war, and many people at home were working in some way connected to the war effort. In 1982, the U.S. unemployment rate was at 10.8%, which was relatively quite high, so the military might have been more enticing that year for a lot of people. It was also quite high in 2010, 2011, and 2012, but in 2021 it was just 3.9%. According to Statistica, it's just 3.5% in 2022. This is super low. So that's another reason fewer people seem to be going out for a job with decent retirement benefits and pays an average of $65,000 a year, or well above that if you stay in the military long enough and try to excel there. The thing is, to many young Americans, that's not attractive enough, and neither is the fact that earlier in the year, the Army was saying it would give new recruits a bonus of $50,000 if they signed a 6-year contract. What's wrong with these people? They will tell you nothing at all. They just don't want to join the Army. It's not their thing. The Rand Corporation said something that we guessed the military never expected. It said during the pandemic, a lot of young people worked from home. They liked it. They now think much more about achieving a healthy work-life balance. If a talented young person can earn enough to live on from writing computer code from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. in their boxer shorts, would they really be up for doing one of the hardest jobs in the world? A job whose small print in the contract might as well say, P.S. You could lose a limb and get deep fried like breaded chicken breast. The pandemic mattered in other ways, too. People were locked down for a while. People didn't mingle as much. Going to the supermarket felt like entering a war zone. Talking to a stranger felt like having unprotected sex. How do you think this affected the military's ability to talk to people? The answer is bad. Not many young people got buttered up by the military over the last 2 years. There's something else, too, and it's a huge issue. Here's some data from the CDC. From 1999 and 2000 through 2017 to March 2020, U.S. obesity prevalence increased from 30.5% to 41.9%. During the same time, the prevalence of severe obesity increased from 4.7% to 9.2%. The USA is one of the highest levels of obesity in the world, especially if we're thinking about large, well-developed nations. It was bad in 2020, but the obesity level in the US rose a further 3% over the first year of the pandemic. Who would have thought that being imprisoned in your home, stressed out of your mind, watching Netflix all day while stuffing your face with colorful snacks made of sugar and saturated fat would be bad for your weight? Then there was the extra booze, and booze consumption levels rocketed during the Great Fear. In 2019, USA Facts reported that the obesity level in the US tripled over the last 50 years. Why does this matter, you might ask? And possibly accuse us of fat shaming. We're not shaming anyone, we're just telling you that being well overweight makes it hard to get through military training and do things like finish those notorious military obstacle courses, such as Private Pyle demonstrated in the movie Full Metal Jacket. We didn't see the rest of that movie. We hope Private Pyle came out of it okay. But more than being unable to climb up a rope, obesity in young people can cause high blood pressure, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, joint issues, and breathing issues like asthma. In fact, the CDC said that because of this obesity epidemic in the US, the military has fewer people to choose from, and that negatively impacts national security. The USA is eating itself into losing its next war. Folks are just too fat to fight. We aren't kidding. This is what a lieutenant general recently reported. Just over 1 in 3 young adults aged 17 to 24 is too heavy to serve in our military. Among the young adults who meet weight requirements, only 3 in 4 report physical activity levels that prepare them for challenges in basic training. It's gotten so bad, says the U.S. National Institutes of Health, that various parts of the military have had to move the goalposts in terms of BMI limits. You can now score worse in the weight for height tables and at least get your foot in the door. You can now be pre-obese but not obese. Let's face it, being pre-obese is now the new normal. It's complicated though. You might have had a high-ish BMI and still pass. A military veterans website told us this. An 18-year-old male Army recruit who is 5'5" must weigh no more than 163 pounds. A 25-year-old male Army recruit who is the same height can weigh no more than 165, and a 30-year-old male Army recruit who is 5'5" inches can weigh no more than 168. The website said the Army is serious about health, so if you turn up sucking on Marlboro Reds, stinking of 8 King Cobra 40s you had last night, and looking like you grew up in a house made of M&Ms, you probably won't even get past the first interview. Each military branch has different standards regarding weight, but obviously, if you want to fly a Lockheed Martin F-35 Lightning II, you'll have to fit in it and be able to eject out of it. You'll have to do some kind of fitness test too, such as in the Army, they want you to do 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, and a 2-mile time to run. It's a point system, and you don't have to be Mo Farah to pass, but trundling around the course like a sloth late for the bus just won't cut it. For a very high score for the 2-mile run, you need to do it in around 13 minutes, which is really fast for a regular dude or dudess. Walking would take most people 30 to 45 minutes, so obviously the Army wants you to be fairly fit. As we said, this counts out a huge chunk of American youngsters already. Not only that, but the military doesn't want you if you have a disqualifyingly kind of crime on your criminal record. The New York Times says these days that takes even more young people out of the picture for a life in the military. The number of young folks with criminal records has been on the rise as of late. The Center for American Progress and Generation Progress wrote in 2022, young people, those aged 18 to 35, make up only 30% of the U.S. adult population, yet they represent 60% of adult arrests and 42% of adult prison admissions. This is why the military has made some concessions lately to expand the net of who can enlist. Neck tattoos are no longer an issue, and the Army announced in 2022 that people no longer need to have passed high school to join up. So now you can look like Lil Uzi Vert or 6ix9ine and also have their academic backgrounds, but they'd both be counted out since in more ways than one they have rap sheets. Still, if you look like some infant scrawled on your face while you were sleeping and you have more D's in your educational background than Dolly Parton has written in her bra collection, you can still get into the military. Nonetheless, according to the Pentagon's latest data, 76% of people in the U.S. aged 17 to 24 wouldn't be able to enlist even if they tried their hardest. This is because they either have a criminal record, are too overweight, or have certain medical issues. But even then, the military's biggest problem is what we outlined at the start of the show. That is the attitude of young people. It's now being reported that even if you asked every young adult in the U.S. if they would even consider joining the military, 9% of those eligible to fight may do so. This is not just about them being able to stomach it, as Orwell said, or that they've seen too much blood and guts from the reality of war, but also because they've lost some trust in the U.S. government and its military. We didn't say that, the military did, or at least a recruiting general did. With that in mind, will any of you youngsters out there ever be drafted into the military? You'd probably think, no way! But yes way. If Congress voted on it in the event of a national emergency, you'd have no say in the matter. Who knows, if that happened, some of you would happily put down your gaming pads and pick up a rifle, but we guess many of you would watch the National Draft Day Lottery on TV in a state of petrified panic. Now you need to watch insane facts you never knew about the US military, or have a look at what if Russia launched a nuclear bomb minute by minute.